أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم وبه نستعين والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا ونبينا محمد وآله الطيبين الطاهرين اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. قال الله العظيم في محكم كتابه الكريم وقوله الحق والأصدق القائلين أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم وجزاهم بما صبروا جنة وحريرا متكئين فيها على الأرائك لا يرون فيها شمسا ولا زمهريرا ودانية عليهم ظلالها وذللت قطوفها تذليلا ويطاف عليهم بآنية من فضة وأكواب كانت قوارير من فضة قدروها تقديرا ويسقون فيها كأسا كان مزاجها زنجبيلا عينا فيها تسمى سلسبيلا ويطوف عليهم ولدان مخلدون إذا رأيتهم حسبتهم لؤلؤا منثورا وإذا رأيت ثم رأيت نعيما وملكا كبيرا. آمنا بالله. صدق الله العلي العظيم. In our last conversation, we concluded by discussing the rewards and the accolades that are given and gifted toward individuals known as the Abrar. And we defined what it means to be amongst the Abrar. And we defined what it means to being in a state of love of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and to give out of oneself in the way that God mentions in the anecdote of the Prophet and Ali and Fatima and Hassan and Al-Hussein. وَيُطْعِمُونَ الطَّعَامَ عَلَى حُبِّهِ مِسْكِينًا وَيَتِيمًا وَأَسِيرًا إِنَّمَا نُطْعِمُكُمْ لِوَجْهِ اللَّهِ, and how to give out of oneself, how to give for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. لَا نُرِيدُ مِنْكُمْ جَزَاءً وَلَا شُكُورًا, that when they give, they don't give with any desire for gratitude or with any desire to get a reward in return. And beginning in verse number 11 into 12 and all the way till about verse number 23, verse number 22, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about the rewards that they attain and what paradise looks like. And we've spoken in the past, a couple of weeks back, about the realities of divine punishment and why is it that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala punishes and holds us to account. But in these ayat, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, with very sort of precise detail, defines for us some of the characteristics and the nature of paradise. And I mentioned to you all a couple of weeks ago as well, that a lot of times when we read verses of paradise, we only see the physical. We only see the physical realities and manifestations of paradise because they're pleasing to us, because we can relate to them. We can attach ourselves to food and to drink and to couches and to, rivers and to big homes and to, all of the benefits that God discusses and explains within the ayat of the Holy Quran, because we love those things. We like those things. We're innately inclined toward all of these things. We want more wealth, we want more money, we want more power, we want more materialism, because we just attach to those things and we connect to them and we understand them and we can rationalize them. But for us to understand the deeper depth beyond what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is speaking to when He mentions these ayat and these verses of paradise, is not only limited toward physical manifestations, but rather it means something a bit deeper. That which is much more pleasurable than any physical reward is spiritual reward. There are people who have everything physically, right, in terms of every materialistic benefit, but at the end of the day, when they're spiritually void of that innate seeking that fulfills the heart and soul, they feel like they don't have anything. And then there are people who have absolutely nothing by virtue of our perception of what is materialistic, but you see that they're the most happy and they're the most content, and they're not concerned about having more because they're comfortable with what they have at that given moment. And in paradise, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions all of these physical things, perhaps one of the reasons to incentivize us and to motivate us to say, okay, I'm going to pray, I'm going to fast, I'm going to worship, I'm going to give, I'm going to do all of these things. But then in that verse, he states that if you want to get to the highest level, and if you want to reach the highest state, he states that there are those who la nuridu minkum jaza'an wala shukura. They are not working or doing what it is that they're doing because they're looking for reward or because they're looking for gratitude for what it is that they do, but rather innama nut'imukum liwajhillah. We do this for God's sake only. You know, sometimes when we perform our day-to-day tasks, we go to work and we do our job, or we go to school and we commit to this major that we just thought it in our minds was going to, lead us to like a good career or whatever. We go through the motions, and in the beginning, we don't, we just see the incentive at the end of it, right? I want to get into finance because I want to make money. I want to, get into medicine because I'm going to have like a prestigious career, right? I don't know, whatever it is. But later on, you realize that, wait a minute, there's actually more to my career than what I thought initially. And not only do you start to realize there's more depth to it, but you actually put yourself more into it, and you're no longer concerned with the money behind it, or the accolades, or the credential, or the prestige, or whatever comes along with it. Is that fair to say? I think we encounter that or we experience that during the course of our lives very often. Over here, with regards to our spiritual connection with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, for many of us, ritual is very, very similar in that regard, right? We learn to pray at a young age because if you don't pray, you're going to go to hell, right? If you don't pray, you're going to get punished. If you don't pray, you're not going to, whatever, right? You're going to get in trouble by your parents. Then we grow up and we realize okay, I'm not shackled by, my parents' belt or whatever it might be that connects me with these prayers. But I actually realize that if I pray, wait a minute, this God is kind of cool God, right? He's gonna bless me with all these cool things in paradise and whatever, and in dunya too. But then beyond that, we want to ascend to the highest station, right? Which is, yes, I used to pray because of fear of hell, and then I prayed because of hope and reward, and now I pray because I see value in it, and I know who I'm praying to. And it's this sort of development and growth and maturity with regards to our relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And so for many people, they don't necessarily get there ever during the course of their lives. Or they often get stuck on one or the other in terms of these steps that we need to take toward understanding God. So be it fear or be it reward. And you'll see that in the same vein that God mentions punishment, he'll also mention paradise, because perhaps worshiping God through the lens of paradise is more advantageous toward our hearts than worshiping God because of a fear of hell, or fear of punishment, or fear of accountability, for instance. But then to also see that beyond the verses that speak about paradise, there's actually something a bit deeper, but it just requires a little bit of contemplation. You follow what I'm saying? So let's go into that contemplation here. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he states, وَجَزَاهُمْ بِمَا صَبَرُوا جَنَّةً وَحَرِيرًا. In verse number 12 of chapter 76, Surah al-Insan, for those of you who have been following since the beginning, he states, and God rewarded them for their patience with a garden and with clothing of silk. In verse number 8, 9, what did he say? He says, they are those who worked without any hope in jaza, without any hope in reward. And in this verse, God says, وَجَزَاهُمْ, but don't worry about it. We still gave to them. We do someone a favor, and they say, how can I repay you? And you say, no, I don't need any repayment, right? And then they come back and they repay you, right? And you appreciate it, and it's nice, and it's a you see it as a blessing. I was listening to this podcast a couple of days ago, and it talks about how to cultivate donor relations or whatever, or they were interviewing someone whose job is in cultivating donor relations, whatever. And he said one of the most unique things that this guy saw in his whatever decades of fundraising was that the ones who gave, like in very large amounts, they would give, and it would suffice that we would send them a thank you note. He was saying that then I got together with my team and we said, these guys giving $25, $30, $40, $50, $100,000 toward like these charitable causes. We should do something more for them than just send them like a thank you card. So they all got together. They said, okay, from now on, whoever gives over a certain like amount, not only are we going to send them a thank you card, we send them like a mug, like a T-shirt, like a hoodie, a hat, right? Like like all this whatever, right? And they realized like they had enough data to suggest that if they gave like these like gifts in return for the large contributions that they were giving, the following year they actually wouldn't give as much as they did the previous year. Because perhaps even the one who gives, though they're not wanting anything in return initially, once they got something in return, they start to see it as a transaction. So they're like, what the hell am I going to do with this mug and this hoodie and this T-shirt? Like I didn't, And so there's that $25,000 for like a mug, right? I could buy my own mugs, I could buy 25,000 mugs, So why are they sending me? So in other words, sometimes it's better that we actually don't get anything in return because it actually cultivates some humility within the human being. And, so over here, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He says that those of the abrar, those who give only for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, they don't want any reward. But then God says, but because they didn't want any reward, we rewarded them, right? But not with something simplistic, again. And you don't only want to see this as physical, but you want to see this as spiritual gifts as well. Yes?
So can we seek reward from Allah? Like when you do these good deeds, and you're not seeking recognition or compensation from humans, but you have transactional promises from Allah. Is that seeking reward, or is that?
It's fine. It's permissible from like a legal lens for you to say, I will do this. Oh Allah, you please give me this. There's nothing wrong with that, right? But the idea is to get to a higher level, right? Whereby we're not concerned with the reward.
I'm not saying transaction. I'm saying I'm doing this for the favor of Allah. Just blanket.
That's what we want, ideally, yeah. I think that's the ideal. That's the ideal.
I mean, that's kind of like, or like I know like on South there's just a continent with the concept of another about, you ask God for something, if something comes true, whatever, maybe I'll do this.
That's more transactional though, yeah.
Yeah,
right. Yeah. So ideally we want to get to the state where, again, there's nothing wrong with that, right? But ideally we get to the state where we're doing it solely for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, meaning that our intention has been purified. We talked about this a couple of weeks ago. So in verse number 12, God states, وَجَزَاهُمْ بِمَا صَبَرُوا جَنَّةً وَحَرِيرًا. So we rewarded them for their patience with the garden, with paradise, وَحَرِيرًا, and garments of silk, but it doesn't necessarily mean garments of silk. It means some sense of nobility, right? Some sense of honor. You're decorated within a certain clothing, but the clothing is meant to be symbolic of honor and praise and appreciation and validation and all of those things. Oftentimes when we read Quran, we read these verses and we read the rewards of paradise and we only see the literal, we don't see the depth to it. مُتَّكِئِينَ فِيهَا عَلَى الْأَرَائِكِ وَيَرَوْنَ فِيهَا شَمْسًا وَلَا زَمْهَرِيرًا. And I think we concluded on this verse last week, that they will be reclined on their couches. On one level, it could be literal, that we're going to be sitting on these really comfortable couches, they're going to be relaxed. But more than that, it means that we're going to be at peace, right? When you're sitting on a couch, what's that symbolic of? Weekend, no responsibilities, no tasks, no obligations. You're comfortable, no stress, no anxiety. You're in a state of contentment. لا يرون فيها شمسا ولا زمهريرا. It's not too hot, nor is it too cold, meaning total comfort and contentment, because you know that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala at that moment is pleased with you. وَدَانِيَةً عَلَيْهِمْ ظِلَالُهَا وَظُلِّلَتْ قُطُوفُهَا تَذْلِيلًا. And there will be shades that will close over them as we're sitting on these couches, again, in total comfort. And there will be this low-hanging fruit, meaning that even those desires that we have in the world beyond this one, they won't require any effort to get to, It's like, it's something when you're like so, like, you're sitting on the couch, right? And you're like very, very comfortable. And like there's, everything is like perfect in your life. And you're like, I'm not going to get up here for like 2 hours, right? And it's going to be like the greatest 2 hours of my life. And then you realize like two things, right? Number one, your phone is like left in your bedroom and you really need your phone, right? And then number two, like the remote is like too far from where you are. You're like, I have to get up now, right? Or you get hungry in the course of those 2 hours. You get thirsty, there's no water or coffee next to you. Like if everything could just be in front of you at every given moment, how great would life be? It would be pretty fantastic. So over here, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala on one level is perhaps stating very literally that there will be these fruits, and these fruits will be perfect, They won't have, when you pull out the grape won't have any thorns or seeds, or now we can get genetically modified fruits anyway, so we have it pretty close to paradise, I guess, as you can assume. But you get what I'm saying, right? That everything is at ease and everything is perfect and every food is delicious, but also the simplicity of that comfort that we have, it cannot be exchanged for anything, nor can it be actualized in this dunya at all. وَيُطَافُ عَلَيْهِمْ بِآنِيَةٍ مِّن فِضَّةٍ وَأَكْوَابٍ كَانَتْ قَوَارِيرَ. They will be served around with vessels of silver and goblets of crystal, right? So that we will be fed and adorned with all of these sort of beautiful manifestations of paradise, again, as if we're royalty, but again, what are we being fed with? And again, on one level, it's going to be whatever food that we desire. But more than that, we're being fed with more knowledge, more ma'rifah, more appreciation. Through that exposure that we have of these blessings of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we appreciate God a little bit more. I was talking to this individual yesterday, and he is studying to become a rabbi within Jewish tradition. And he was telling me that there's like a joke, I guess, that is stated within within rabbinical school, that paradise is basically sitting around with your closest friends and people who understand you with a lot of books, and you guys are all and everyone is studying together, right? So symbolically that, when someone is in the case of, learning and acquiring knowledge, again, in a way that fills the heart, not just is a means to the ultimate end, there's something enjoyable about that and pleasurable about that, And we are told as well, that in paradise, learning never ends. And this ma'rifah of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala never ends. So inshallah, we'll be in whatever level of paradise, and maybe the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam will be gathered around him like this, and he'll be teaching us about Allah, teaching us about the next stage of paradise that we're hopefully going to get to, right? And he'll be all the way there. He'll come down to visit us, hopefully, right? And he'll teach us, and we'll learn from him. And that will be more enjoyable, again, than any other of these physical manifestations that we imagine during the course of our curiosity. قوارير من فضة قدروها تقديرا. There will be these crystals of silver, again, in this sort of descriptive way that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions, from which they dispense in a precise manner, meaning that whatever object of food or drink that's going to satiate us will be perfected in front of us at that moment. وَيُسْقَوْنَ فِيهَا كَأْسًا كَانَ مِزَاجُهَا زَنْجَبِيلًا. And we will be served with a cup of drink seasoned with zanjabil, ginger, but it's not, ginger was meant to be symbolic of something that had a really attractive fragrance to it. Okay, for instance. عَيْنًا فِيهَا تُسَمَّى سَلْسَبِيلًا. Now hear me out for 1 second. And this drink will come from the spring, and the spring will be known as Salsabila, right? In some of the du'as that we recite that are taught to us by Ahlul Bayt, we say, oh Allah, grant us the drink from Salsabil, right? It's this unique spring that gives out whatever drink in the highest station of paradise. Follow so far? If you understand the Arabic language, you'll know that the word Salsabil comes from two words. Number one, sal. Number two, sabil. What does it mean? What does sal mean? Ask. Ask. And what does sabil mean? Yeah, the path, right? So it's a play on words here. On one level, it's a spring known as Salsabil, but it comes from these two words. Ask for the path, meaning that maybe this gift that we are given is going to direct us closer to that ultimate path that we're seeking. Remember, there's never complacency. Now hear me out for a second. There's never complacency. We ask for paradise all the time. Oh Allah, give me paradise. Oh Allah, Rabbana atina fid dunya hasana wa fil akhirati. We ask Allah all the time, right? But paradise in and of itself, not everyone is equal in paradise either. How can it be? How can it be that we are, inshallah, we're all together in the highest rank of paradise, but how can it be that we compare ourselves to the prophets of Allah Azza wa Jal, right? Or that we are in the company of the messenger himself, sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, and the imams of Ahlul Bayt, peace and blessings be upon them. We can't. So there's certain levels, meaning that there's always opportunity to ascend toward a higher station and a higher level in paradise. So that seeking and that desire to find that path, to know Allah, to increase our knowledge. Remember we said that in day one of this conversation on Surah al-Insan, that the ultimate sort of major theme of this chapter is to increase our ma'rifah of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to increase our knowledge of God. Now over here, that on that day we'll be reaching this, spring, and maybe it will be physical, maybe, I don't know. But at the end of the day, it is a means for us to uncover and unveil a little bit more of how to find that path, so that we're able to continue to tread in the way of Allah Azza wa Jal. وَيَطُوفُ عَلَيْهِمْ وِلْدَانٌ مُخَلَّدُونَ إِذَا رَأَيْتَهُمْ حَسِبْتَهُمْ لُؤْلُؤًا مَنْثُورًا. And they will be waited upon, meaning we, the people of paradise, the abrar, by these young people, young servants of paradise, who will basically be our support staff, so to say. They'll be at our service, right? And they will guide us to where we need to go, right? You walk into, I don't know, some fancy restaurant or hotel or whatever, and they tell you why don't you take a seat over here, and let me give you this drink, and why don't you wait over here until your food is ready or your table is ready, whatever, right? So we'll have all of this, basically creations of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala at our service on that day. And when we see them, you will suppose them to be scattered pearls. Again, in a sort of symbolic or beautiful way. Who are these people? Who are these young people that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions? I don't know the answer for sure, but some of the commentators of the Quran, they state, for instance, that these are children, for instance, who had passed away at a very young age, and that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala granted them this honor in paradise and granted them this responsibility in paradise. Others say, for instance, that they were the children of parents who were non-believers, right? So, and they lived a difficult life, and they could have never been exposed to the light of truth, or whatever. And because of that, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is all just, He places them in this responsibility. First, my whole point is we don't exactly know, and there's different explanations or commentaries or opinions with regards to who they are. At the end of the day, fundamentally, we can accept them as creations of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. For whatever reason, they have been honored and they have been given this rank, because they could also be angels, right? They could be, we don't know. We don't fundamentally know with absolute certainty. But they will be at the service of the abrar. وَإِذَا رَأَيْتَ ثُمَّ رَأَيْتَ نَعِيمًا وَمُلْكًا كَبِيرًا. It's really beautiful. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He states, and then at that moment, you will look. You meaning the people of paradise, us. وَإِذَا رَأَيْتَ, and then you will look again. ثُمَّ رَأَيْتَ نَعِيمًا وَمُلْكًا كَبِيرًا. You will see around you all of this blessing. So remember, we drink from this well. This well is symbolic of guidance. This next step is that you're surrounded by these guides, virtually, taking you to where you need to go, and then you enter into where you're supposed to be. So the food and the drink and the couches is basically a preview of the actual paradise that we'll be attaining. You follow? Because this comes afterwards. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَإِذَا رَأَيْتَ ثُمَّ رَأَيْتَ نَعِيمًا وَمُلْكًا كَبِيرًا. We'll have to take a double glance at it to be whoa, this is pretty awesome, right? This is for me, It sounds pretty remarkable. That you will see the blessing of God and you will see this immaculate kingdom in front of you. Again, the prerequisite to all of this is to make sure you start with your prayers. One day, a man, he comes to Imam as-Sadiq alayhi salam, and he states, O grandson of the Messenger of God, can you explain to me with detail, like, what does the food taste like in paradise? And what do the homes look like in paradise? And what's the temperature in paradise? With detail. I want to know every detail of paradise, O grandson of the Messenger of God. And he sat down looking at the face of the Imam, waiting for the Imam to respond to him virtually. The Imam tells him, he says, my brother, he says, go home and focus on your prayers. Right? At the end of the day, these are meant to be incentive. They're meant to pull us to where we need to go. But if we are not performing our prayers, and if we're not fulfilling our religious duties and obligations, what difference is all of this going to make? Right? We'll get there, inshallah, and it's meant to be the motivation for us to do so, but it starts, of course, undoubtedly with responsibility. But it suffices that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions these for a reason. وَإِذَا رَأَيْتَ ثُمَّ رَأَيْتَ نَعِيمًا. You'll look and then you'll look again, and all you see around you is blessing. وَمُلْكٍ كَبِيرًا. And this incredible, vast, great kingdom. The guy doesn't stop. He states, آلِيَهُمْ ثِيَابُ سُنْدُسٍ خُضْرٌ وَاسْتَبْرَقٍ وَحُلُّوا أَسَاوِرَ مِنْ فِضَّةٍ وَسَقَاهُمْ رَبُّهُمْ شَرَابًا طَهُورًا. He states, and upon them will be cloaks of green silk. Again, symbolic of honor, of pride. And they'll be adorned with bracelets of silver. And if you go to some commentators of the Quran, they spend so much time talking about, what these, decorations are going to look like, what the jewelry is going to look like. Fundamentally, I don't think it matters so much. But then this is important. Then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala states in the last part, in verse number 21, He states, وَسَقَاهُمْ رَبُّهُمْ شَرَابًا طَهُورًا. Now hear me out. He states, Azza wa Jal, and their Lord will give them to drink a pure drink. It doesn't say that they will be given this delicious drink, this fragrant drink, this satisfying drink. Aside from what the drink is, God knows. But what's unique about this language is that it states, وَسَقَاهُمْ رَبُّهُمْ, that their Lord is the one, meaning Allah is the one who will feed us this drink. Others, ayat, talks about how there's going to be these people who are going to guide us, that we're going to just reach this spring with water or whatever with drink coming out. We're going to be like hanging out with angels and with the people that we love and other ayat of the Quran. That we're going to be in the company with our family and our friends and our loved ones from the dunya, right? We have that. But over here, it doesn't say any of that. Not with people, not relationships, none of that matters anymore. The only thing that matters is God. وَسَقَاهُمْ رَبُّهُمْ شَرَابًا طَهُورًا. And their Lord will give them a pure drink. How much are we drinking, right? There's these drinks of paradise in these goblets, right, that God mentions before. And then we're going to drink zanjabil, this gingery drink. And then we're going to drink out of this, It's all symbolic of something that we're attaining until we get to the ultimate attainment. And that is directly from God Himself. No more intermediaries. Of course, not physically, but no more, meaning Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will illuminate our heart with His light at that moment, and we don't understand what that means. But what we do know is that is exactly and precisely, internally, what we're consistently seeking during the course of our lives. If we had that, if we had a little bit of that, like that glance, so to say, from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, again, not physically, we wouldn't be concerned with wealth or with 401k or with work or with relationships or with anything, right? Because we're at total peace and contentment. And over here, we go through all of these, blessings of paradise and all the materialism of it, right? And it's all wonderful and it's all great and it's all beautiful. And then we look at this massive kingdom and we look up at it and we're so pleased and we're, we take a double take at it. And then God says, now you get the ultimate gift. وَسَقَاهُمْ رَبُّهُمْ, that your Lord will give you this pure drink. And then God concludes. And He states, إِنَّ هَذَا كَانَ لَكُمْ جَزَاءً وَكَانَ سَعْيُكُمْ مَشْكُورًا. And they will be told, the people of paradise, at that moment, when they're receiving this drink directly from Allah, they will be told that this is your reward. That this is your reward. And surely all of your efforts, they will appreciate it. Now hear me out. This is verse number 22. This is how God concludes his description of paradise within Surah al-Insan. If we rewind again, and this is the most important part, I think. If we go back to verse number 9, to where we left off in the previous discussion, where we deduced from the anecdote of Rasulullah Muhammad and Ali and Fatima and Hassan and Hussein, when they give out of their own food, وَيُطْعِمُونَ الطَّعَامَ عَلَى حُبِّهِ مِسْكِينًا وَيَتِيمًا وَعَسِيرًا. In verse number 9, they state, إِنَّمَا نُطْعِمُكُمْ لِوَجْهِ اللَّهِ, right? That we are feeding for the sake of God, nothing else. We're only doing it for Allah. لَا نُرِيدُ مِنْكُمْ جَزَاءً وَلَا شُكُورًا. Number one, oh Allah, we don't want any reward. We want to do it just for you. And number two, oh Allah, we don't want anyone to thank us. Not the people that we gave food to, and we don't even want we don't need your gratitude. Of course, if you're grateful, we're grateful. But at the end of the day, we're not working for that. We're not working for your validation. We're working for you, fundamentally, essentially. Right? And then God, he states, وَجَزَاهُمْ بِهِ, and we will reward you, don't worry. And he will reward you with this and this and this and this, as we go through all of these ayat. And then in verse number 22, he states, إِنَّ هَذَا كَانَ لَكُمْ جَزَاءً. All of that which preceded in these last 10 verses, that's the reward that you get for that little bit that you do in sincerity for God. Number one, وَكَانَ سَعْيُكُمْ مَشْكُورًا. And even though you did not want gratitude, the all-grateful Lord of the worlds, he is expressing his gratitude to you for your efforts in this dunya. God doesn't need it. He doesn't need our deeds. He doesn't need our a'mal. Doesn't need our prayers. Doesn't need our charity. But he states that if you do it for my creation, I will give you all of this. That's the lesson. That's the fundamental principle that this faith teaches us. We're not meant to being someone who only is in a state of obedience to God between us and him, subhanahu wa ta'ala. Irham man fil ard, yarhamukum man fis sama. But if you show mercy to the creation, then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, or the one in heaven, will show mercy to you. Through that effort of giving a little bit, toward those around us, for God's sake, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will give us all of this بإذن الله تعالى. والحمد لله رب العالمين وصلى اللهم على سيدنا ونبينا محمد وآله الطيبين الطاهرين. Inshallah, next week we'll continue with verses beginning with number 23. Inshallah ta'ala. Walhamdulillah rabbil alameen.